I don't know what Dr. Bagoli is thinking, but I know what I would be thinking in this situation. Screw all of you people. You expect me to try to treat these Ebola patients without anything. The only thing I'm doing is just putting myself at risk. There is no amount of money that you could pay me to change places with Dr. Bagoli right now. There is a huge Ebola outbreak going on in the Congo right now. Let's look at this New York Times video. Really fascinating because it was taken before the arrival of huge amounts of international aid. You get to see what the healthcare system is like at the beginning of an Ebola outbreak.
When we walked into this Ebola ward, it was very striking that in this confined space, you had a grown man being treated, you had this young child.
This is just such a typical rural African district hospital. Ebola outbreaks happen in these areas. This is the intersection between the human world and the animal world. This is where patients are coming normally whenever they get sick. And they get sick of a lot of really severe diseases like HIV, malaria, TB. This is not a Ebola treatment unit that you might see on the news. This is a regular rural district hospital that is filled with Ebola patients.
Who just arrived, and you had a person who had died of Ebola lying in that same space. It's very difficult to separate.
Pretty basic, right? I mean, you've got some IV fluids, but not much else. You see monitors, you see ventilators. Do you see really high level ICU care? No, I mean, that doesn't exist in this hospital even during normal times. So when you have a big outbreak and now the hospital is filling up with Ebola patients, this is what you got. And you can see the father there is with his son. He's a caregiver for the son. There isn't enough staff in this hospital to care for everybody. And that's a serious infection control problem. If you remember back in 2014, after that huge outbreak in West Africa, there was a lot of scientific activity. They developed a vaccine, they developed some really effective treatments, but those are for the Zaire strain. It's not for Bundibugyo. That means we're back to square one. And in this hospital, you can see how Ebola can actually transmit inside of a healthcare facility.
It's very difficult to separate the people who are potential Ebola victims with the people who actually are confirmed to have it, because no results had come back from the blood test that they had sent.
In normal times, can it diagnose Ebola? Probably, maybe, but if so, only the most common strain, which is Zaire. Bundibugyo is not detected by commercially available laboratory tests. The only way to diagnose, to confirm that your patient has Ebola, is to take a blood sample and send it to the capital, where you have laboratories, national laboratories, that are much higher level. But more than that, this laboratory, can it do the basic laboratory tests? The monitoring that you need to do with a severely ill Ebola patient that is vomiting, that is having diarrhea, electrolytes completely out of whack, that needs aggressive IV hydration. I'm ready to bet no. This is a regular rural laboratory. It's just not set up for that kind of activity.
The hospital doesn't even have the resources to feed patients. People's relatives have to come to the Ebola ward just to bring them bottles of water and food.
Yeah, I mean, that's a regular rural district hospital in Africa. I've been in a lot of these places. I've never seen a single one that has got a kitchen, a huge staff making 3 hot meals a day for its patients. No, I mean, the relatives have to feed the patients. And more than that, they have to care for the patients. They have to clean them up. If they're dirty, they have to wash them. They have to walk them around. And with Ebola, especially with severely ill Ebola patients that are covered with bodily fluids, who are really sick, they are extremely infectious. And that's how family members are going to get infected. So let me be clear. I've treated infectious diseases in a lot of places really similar to this, but I have never treated Ebola. But the global health community is small, and I know doctors who live for this kind of thing. They're a strange breed. They get excited when there's an Ebola outbreak and they fly around chasing the virus. I would love to interview one of these colleagues. They're a bit camera shy. I'm still hopeful I can do that. But for now, you're stuck with me.
I was shown around by a 32-year-old Congolese doctor who was, absolutely frustrated by the lack of resources. He said he just couldn't understand how it had taken so long to identify this outbreak. He couldn't understand how it had taken the Congolese government and, in fact...
You can see this doctor doffing his PPE, which is the personal protective equipment. And, when you're caring for Ebola patients, that PPE, the outside of that PPE gets covered with bodily fluids, highly infectious bodily fluids. Yeah, this is something that he's very aware of right now. Do not infect yourself. If you do, you're going to end up in that same ward with all of your other patients. And yeah, he's frustrated by the lack of resources. He knows what to do. The DRC is where Ebola outbreaks happen all the time, smaller, of course. But knowing what to do and having the resources to do it is completely different. I mean, look at it. There's just 2 people here. With this many Ebola patients, you would expect doctors, nurses, support staff, huge buildings being constructed to house patients safely. You would expect medicines, IV fluids, a whole other level of laboratory. He doesn't have any of those things. So yeah, I don't know what Dr. Bugyo is thinking, but I know what I would be thinking in this situation. Screw all of you people. You expect me to try to treat these Ebola patients without anything. The only thing I'm doing is just putting myself at risk. There is no amount of money that you could pay me to change places with Dr. Bugyo right now. Now, the videos that are coming out now, that are on the nightly news, they're more typical. This is what you want. First, setting up tents just for immediate storage, but they actually have to build whole buildings where patients can be treated, hopefully with windows that are large enough so relatives can actually see their loved ones inside. Staff, just so many staff. This is what you want to see. Foreigners, locals, doctors, nurses, all in the right PPE, all having the right equipment, setting up for really the months to come. So you can see a huge amount of resources that are being brought in by MSF. And that's all good because you need that for Ebola. It's an incredibly difficult disease to treat. You have to monitor their electrolytes. You have to keep them hydrated. You have to just keep them alive, let the disease run its course, and hopefully the patient comes out on the other side. This is a disease that requires ICU levels of care, and you can see what these hospitals are like when there's no Ebola. And that's something that is noted by the local communities. When there's no Ebola outbreak, patients are dying from HIV, malaria, and TB. And even though the healthcare system is weak, nobody seems to care. But when you have an Ebola outbreak, here you come. All of these foreigners, all of these NGOs with their fancy cars, building huge hospitals, laboratories, medicines, and medical equipment that the doctors have read about but never actually seen or used. It would make a lot more sense if people were interested in the health of this population when there wasn't an Ebola outbreak going on. It would make us a whole lot safer and able to deal with emerging diseases like Ebola. But that's not what's going on. That's not the way the world is right now. So here's a New York Times video, a mom who is mourning the death of her 25-year-old daughter.
Another mother is grieving at the main hospital in Mangwalu, believed to be ground zero of Congo's most recent Ebola outbreak. She's alone and overwhelmed. We're told her 26-year-old daughter has just died of suspected Ebola.
She's got suspected Ebola. What does that mean? It means that, yeah, the doctor thought that she had Ebola and admitted her to the hospital, sent a blood sample to the capital for testing, but that that result never came back. This sister, she's so angry about the death of her brother. She doesn't believe that he died of Ebola.
Marasto, who was filmed by the New York Times just days before he died, worked as the hospital's lab technician.
That's a bad place to get Ebola, by handling the bodily fluids of Ebola patients in your own hospital.
She says he came to the hospital because he assumed his colleagues would save him.
He gets admitted and they can't save him. They can't even diagnose him with Ebola. So she's just so angry. You can just see it in her face. People keep talking about the lack of community trust. And what they don't understand is that it's actually really simple. People lose trust in the medical system if that medical system can't provide an adequate level of medical care. And when you lose that medical trust, and I've seen this many times in patients, it's really, really difficult to get that trust back. Community trust is so important in that other aspect of Ebola control, which is the community response. And there's no treatment, there's no vaccine, so infection control is really important. And here you see this team of healthcare workers that are trying to disinfect a body of somebody who died of Ebola. When these patients at the end, they're very severely ill, they are vomiting, they have diarrhea, they're covered with bodily secretions and fluids that have very high levels of Ebola virus in them, very infectious. And so, you have to disinfect the body, and they're spraying with a chlorine solution. But you can see how alien it is, right? I mean, these are people who she probably knows. They're healthcare workers of that hospital, they're locals, but covered with these Tyvek suits and spraying some chemical over your loved one's body, it can't be a pleasant experience. This video, I'm not even sure where it was taken, but clearly with a mobile phone, and shows a confrontation between the healthcare workers, which are trying to bury the body of an Ebola patient, and the local community, which is really angry. If they've lost trust in the healthcare system, then something like this is just unbearable for the local community. In this case, it wasn't so bad. It didn't escalate into violence. The healthcare workers, they put the coffin down. They allowed the community members to open the coffin. They want to see the patient. They open the coffin. They want to confirm that that's really the patient. In these Ebola treatment units, especially if it's not a well-resourced one, they may not have seen the patient die. They just want to open up the coffin and touch this patient's face. Then they close it up again. Hopefully the body was decontaminated. But fundamentally this is a risk. You can minimize that risk, but you can't get rid of it completely. It's still early days. We don't know how big this Ebola outbreak is going to get, but I think it's going to be huge. There's still a long way to go, months to go. Right now, things are better. So there's international aid coming in. There are NGOs with a lot of experience. But the outbreak was going on for a long time and reached a huge level before those resources started to flow. So we're going to have to see what happens. I thought that these videos are really unique. They really show what things are like at the beginning of an outbreak before the international aid comes. If you see other videos out there that you want me to take a look at, just pop them in the comment and I'll do my best. And I'll try to keep you guys abreast of the major developments in this Ebola outbreak.